And now on to September, and the first thing that I picked up was Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. So this is a poetry collection told in sketches and short fragment poems from Rupi Kaur about surviving the breakup of what I think is a semi-abusive relationship from the way that this book reads. Some poems are entire pages, some poems are tiny fragments, and in short, I really liked this, with some reservations. There are some poems in here which are a bit bumper stickery, and they're less poetry and more the sort of daily affirmations that you would find yourself buying in little packs with pictures of angels on them. Many of them were actually quite poignant. Several of them got me right here. I gave this 4 out of 5, and it wasn't until I did give this 4 out of 5 on Goodreads and I read some of the reviews from some of you lovely people on my friends list that I discovered that not everybody has similar opinion about this book. So if you're swayed by things like that, I maybe wouldn't pick it up, because there's a lot of controversy about themes and about honesty and about how piecemeal this poetry collection is, but I enjoyed it so. The next thing that I picked up was a photography collection, and it was Humans of New York by Brandon Stanton. It is this absolutely stunning hardback. It looks like this under the dust jacket, featuring images and interviews of people who live in New York. The collection is incredibly varied. There are all sorts of characters and all sorts of lives portrayed in here. All kinds of ages, all kinds of sexualities, and every self-identifying gender that you can think of. I think that anything that I say about this book is going to fall short for me, and I'm not going to be satisfied with it, so what I'm going to do is show you and read you my favourite entry and let you decide for yourself. So this is the picture that goes with the interview, and the interview reads, "I'm 86 and that's about enough. I'm ready to go. Aren't you afraid of death?" Why would I be? Isn't that sort of a natural condition of living? Not when you miss your husband as much as I do. The next one that I read, I'm also not going to do a lot of talking about here, because I am going to do a discussion video on it very shortly, as I am incredibly conflicted about it and I really don't know how I feel. And it is Post-Mortem by Patricia Cornwell. This is the first book in the Kay Scarpetta series. Kay Scarpetta is a county coroner. She is the chief medical officer, and she is essentially drafted into helping to solve the murder of 3 or 4, I think by this point, women in Richmond, Virginia. Totally had to check. I think I was potentially a little bit harsh in giving it 3.5 stars, but at the same time, maybe not. The next book that I read was filled with shits and giggles, and it is A Pocket Full of Rye by Agatha Christie. It is the 8th, I think, Miss Marple book, so I'm officially with this one halfway through my Miss Marple read. I'm reading the series in chronological order for my Agatha Christie project. In case you didn't know, in case I haven't talked about it enough by this point, I'm really sure I have. I really liked all of the characters in this one. I found it really compelling to follow along with. This one could have done for me with having some of the text chopped out, and I don't really think that it would have suffered for that particularly much, but nevertheless I did enjoy it. The next one that I read in September I don't actually have with me because I read it on audiobook and I haven't purchased a copy yet, although I will purchase a copy of the actual book because I want it. And that is Not My Father's Son by Alan Cumming. This is the actor Alan Cumming's memoir of what happened to him when he took part in the BBC show Who Do You Think You Are, which is a genealogy show. They take actors or famous personalities, generally from the UK, although I think they've done a few who are, you know, American and different things, and they look into one ancestor in their past and follow them back as far as they can go. And in Alan's case, they followed his mum's father, so his granddad, who they kind of thought died in the war, but they weren't very sure. While he's looking into this on one hand, so in the present day narrative, he's also thinking back on his father and his childhood on the other hand in a past narrative, and the two come together in alternate chapters to really hit two massive revelations in his life that were burned on by the show. I really didn't expect a book that was this weighty or serious to come from Alan Cumming, and it's not because I don't think that he can be a weighty and serious person. It's because I always go to Alan Cumming and his films for comic relief, or like recordings of Cabaret for something that's a little bit risky. So I've never really invested in him as a person outside of his work, and I was really shocked by what I found in that narrative. I found myself twisting up inside a few things and finding myself be really uncomfortable because it was impossible for me not to link some of his experiences to my own growing up. And that's one of the things that I think is amazing about this book, is even if you did not suffer the kind of abuse that he did, the book is incredibly relatable. If you like memoirs, and you especially like memoirs which are told in past and present, then I very much advocate that you pick this up. And so, not to buck the trend about not talking about books, because I'm going to do reviews of them later on, I received the Tidal Zone for review from the wonderful Granta, and I didn't read it, I devoured it. It consumed me. I read it so quickly, and yet when I was getting towards the end, I was trying to force myself to slow down because I didn't want it to end. And like a lot of other people on BookTube, right now I am now going to be delving into Sarah Moss's backlist because this just wasn't enough and I need more. Second to last, because I can hear you all rolling your eyes, it's very dry in your sockets and a little bit disturbing. I read this one. This is Portraits and Flowers, or Portraits and Nudes? Portraits, Nudes, Flowers by Mariano Vivanco. If you love photography and you love fashion photography and you love celebrity photography, then you probably know all about this book, but I didn't know anything about the photographer before I picked it up. This is essentially what it says on the cover. It is portraits, it is beautiful pictures which almost look watercolory of flowers, and it is quite a lot of nudes. What are you doing? Are you getting into Mummy's books? So usually the images are all portrayed with something on the opposite page, but this is a full page portrait of Janet Mock presented with a completely white page because lady needs no help. And one of the gorgeous examples of flower photography, which actually looks like a painted print because it's so vivid. This light really isn't helping my cause any, is it? And finally, the last book that I read in September was Sweet Home by Caris Bray. This has been all over BookTube as well, so I'm not going to tell you too much about it because I'm guessing that if you watch my channel, you'll watch quite a few other similar channels where this will have been featured. But this is Caris Bray, who is the author of The Museum of You and A Song for Issy Bradley, both of which I own and have not read. I've read half of Issy Bradley and I really enjoyed it. That's a story for another day though. However, this is Caris Bray's debut short story collection, which has been reissued by Windmill, who are part of Penguin. This short story collection centred around the idea of motherhood, family and child raising, and so probably wasn't the ideal short story collection for me. So there were a couple of short stories which really missed the mark for me and I felt were a bit too forcing the point. However, there were some absolutely stunning short stories in here. I absolutely consumed Love, Terms and Conditions. It was just so close to the bone. I felt like she had shoved splinters in my hands when I was reading this. Bedrest was a sticky, sweet, slightly sickly little ditty which I quite enjoyed. And then of course there is the short story Scaling Never, upon which a love song for Issy Bradley was later written and you know, extended. So I ended up giving it 3.5, although I would maybe go 3.75, maybe even closer to 4 stars if it just had have had one more story that had really gripped me. But in saying that, if the themes included in this book are something that you really enjoy, then I say pick it up. And on that cheery note, I'm off to read some really spooky, horrible, gruesome October fiction, so wish me luck. Bye guys! Oh wait, that's like X-Files to the tune of Jaws.